Guys, welcome. Today we were going to be working on a greenstone ring. We're going to be making it out of, right here, this is 26 gauge bezel, argentium silver. And this is going to be our ring band. So this is 9 gauge, right here, 9 gauge half round, argentium silver. So, hey, let's get started. So first things first, just like normal, I'm going to take this this sticky note that I cut here. It's kind of like got a tape stick edge on it. And I'm going to get my measurement of the stone. Here I like to just use a razor blade to mark the measurement, and then I'll use my flush cutters to make the perfect cut on that measurement. So now I've got my measurement for my bezel right here. Put this on my bezel material. And like I said before in my other videos, I like to leave a little extra on my measurement on this cut. So if you can see this, I can get this position where you can see it. There we go. So what I like to do is I like to cut just a little bit extra right here. Probably on a smaller stone, it's going to be about a millimeter and a half larger than what I measured as a perfect measurement around the stone. Sometimes I like to check my measurement one more time just to make sure that I've got it filed down precisely where I want it. And on this one, if you can see, it's slightly bigger by about that much. I'll use a round, just the handle off of one of my pointing tools here to roll this silver around the edge. And on this one, I'm just going to make it in kind of a football shape, just so I can get this bezel to line up nicely. And again, you don't want very much tension on your bezel, so you want to move that around until it sits naturally flat, exactly where you want it. Just in that lined up perfectly. Like now I'll take my handy flux. This is just handy flux you can get at Rio Grande sells it. And I just apply that on the front and the back of the bezel. And then I'll kind of move it around a little bit just to make sure that that flux paste gets everywhere. Now I'll set this on my charcoal block. torch. Get a little too much heat here. I'm going to turn this heat down. The smaller the piece that you're soldering, the less heat you need. And it kind of goes the other way too. The bigger the piece is, the more heat you need. And you get kind of the idea of it by watching the color of your metal while you're soldering and making sure that it gets to like just a little bit closer to the pink range. And then it's ready to take that solder. And that went perfectly. Let's just drop this in the water a minute. Grind this on my flat lap a minute. Okay, now just by looking at this, I know the size that I want based on the size of my greenstone and the profile that I'm looking for. So I will show you that right now. So here's my greenstone, and here's the bezel that I just created for it. And you can see that the bezel is just a little bit tall right now, and that's fine. I'm going to keep working at it. But for now, let's see here, my file, and I'm going to file off the burrs. Now I'm going to actually fit this onto the greenstone before I put it back on the flat lap, because I just want to see how close I am to fitting. So this, you kind of just want to, like a pair of shoes, just kind of stick it into the bezel, and you can see right now that it's just kind of tall. You just kind of move this around, I can show you that it's just a little bit high. So like I showed you in my other videos, just take this and you scar the outside edge and roll it kind of around. And that'll put a little scar on the outside of that bezel, just as a visual, so I know where to grind that down to. And you want to make sure you keep the orientation, the top up. Now I'll just prepare this edge by deburring it. So we should have a better, let's see, should have a better fit on this greenstone. And what I'm looking for here, get this just a little closer.
what I'm looking for here on this greenstone is that this profile doesn't rise above the crown, which is just the edge of where it starts to tip in of this greenstone. And so this is a pretty good profile on this stone. I think I might take a little off here because when I push this bezel in, it might cause some wrinkling. So I think it still has to come down just slightly. Again, I'll have to deburr it. Okay. It's a much better profile. So as I roll this around, you can kind of see that that profile on that edge is a lot better. And when we finally set this stone, this is going to be the correct height. It still appears like it's a little bit set down into that bezel, but by the time the back plate is soldered onto the back, there's a bead of solder that forms around it that tends to push the stone up. So this is actually a pretty good profile. I'm ready to solder the back on. I just do that. Typically I just leave the greenstone right in the setting. Mark my silver. Then I'll give this a cut. Now I want to flatten this piece out. Just use the lighter. And I'm not going to stamp this because we're making a ring today. So this is just going to be not stamped. And we're simply going to just use my Dremel here. That'll scar that silver up so that it'll take the flux paste. Now I want to put flux paste everywhere that's going to make contact with that bezel on this back plate. Which I just kind of make a little circle and set that there. Now you want to make sure you keep your orientation of the bezel. The up is up and without moving it, so that you can keep your shape. Just put a little bead of flux paste around the inside. Set it on top of my back plate. And it's ready to solder. Now it helps if your block is, because this one's been heated up quite a few times, it's not quite even or flat. It's important enough to note that you want your surface as flat as you can, or the piece that you're working on as flat as you can make it. It helps with the solder flow. This is going to require a little more heat than previously when I just soldered the bezel, because I have to heat up a lot more silver to do this. So this is probably a bit too hot. Again, you'll get used to seeing the heat. You kind of look at the color of the metal as you heat it up. See, I lifted my block up to sort of make the solder go downhill, if you will, and that does help sometimes. But I'm going to cool this piece off. Okay, I just finished putting this, the bezel that I just created right here on the flat lap, and I made a pretty nice bezel. So the purpose of this video is actually to show you how to attach the bezel to a ring. And so what I've got here, I've got a really nice bezel, and now I need to make the ring portion. So right here, I'm going to use, this is a 9 gauge sterling silver argentium from Rio Grande, and this is a half round. So you can kind of see the end of it right now. It's just cut funny from the last time I used it. So I'm going to sand that part off. There. Now I've made a nice, even, straight edge. I'm going to dry this off, and what we're going to do is we're going to take our sticky note that we used for measuring the cabochon, and I've got my mandrel right here. So when you're measuring to make a ring, if you want, say, a size 7, you don't want to measure a size 7. It always shrinks. So in this case, what I've found is that the thicker the band material you're using, the more the size shrinks when you make your band. This is kind of in the middle. So on like a thicker band, I'll probably go up 2 sizes. And then by the time I wrap that silver around in a circle, it shrinks about 2 sizes. This is kind of a medium size. It's a 9 gauge half round. So I'm gonna, and a lot of this is a guess, but it's a good guess. So I'm making a size 7 today, and I'm gonna measure this band right here at an 8.5. And I'm gonna get a measurement by wrapping my sticky note around my mandrel at size 8.5, and I'm going to cut it with my razor blade to get that exact length. And then I've got, again, my flat stock that I made the edge perfectly flat off here on this side, and I'm just going to lay the sticky note right on the silver. Wish it was a little stickier. And this is going to give me my length at an 8.5 that I measured to get a 7. So right here, it's measured, and I'm going to cut it flush as I can, as straight as I can. And if this is kind of a heavier material, this one I can just cut with my flush cutters, but sometimes you might have to kind of wiggle the band back and forth to get it to cut. It just depends on your pliers.
So now I have a measurement of a piece of silver stock that's measured at an 8.5 on the band, and it should make a size 7 on when it's finished, when it's finalized. So right here, from the flush cutters, I've got a kind of a bad end. I've got to just sand that off flat a minute. Okay. And this is a part where you can kind of get ahead of your skis and forget to sand. Like this piece of sterling is kind of dingy, and it's got some pitting and some blackness on it, and that happens. It's pretty normal for silver. But I'm just going to take my Dremel and I'm going to polish off both sides that I'm going to solder. Flip it around, just like that. This is also the part where you can get a little bit ahead of yourself and forget to stamp your work. So right here, I'm just going to put the metal purity stamp on first. The 935, and then my maker's mark. If you don't have a maker's mark, if you're just getting started, there's a lot of stamp kits that you can buy that have multiple stamps inside the kit. I just picked one that was kind of clever to maybe our business model, if you will, and just stuck with it. I keep using the same one, so it's not something that has to be that complicated. Picked that stamp setup for about $50, so it's kind of funny too because I only use one stamp out of it, but it is what it is. Okay, so now I have this curl in my bench that's really nice. I use it quite often for bending metal and my bezel work, so this is no exception. Basically, I'm going to stick this, I got it a little bit bent already, I'm going to stick this right around about the size 7 mark. Maybe a little smaller because we're trying to make a 7. So if I put it at like a 5 and I bend around this way, and now I've got a candy cane shape piece, and I flip it around and I do the other side at maybe the size 5 mark. So about here. I'm going to have a shape kind of similar to that. And now I need to kind of finish that with my hammer. It's a rubber mallet. And I'll just kind of hit down on it until those ends start to round and take shape around the mandrel. So now I've got a shape similar to this, and it's not quite lined up, but it's got a nice pleasing arc on both sides, and that's what I'm looking for here. So here, it's really just using your fingers, and it's just pushing the ring into shape, and sometimes you have to over push it just a little bit. And really what you're looking for here is more of an oval shape so that your solder lays flat and your joint lays flat, just like that. So this one's ready to be soldered, except I just need a little handy flux on it. I'm just going to flux both sides. It's important that you don't put flux where you don't want the solder to go, because it's kind of hard to remove the solder after it's there. It just takes a lot of extra work.
And so now what I want to do is I kind of just want to move this ring back and forth and make sure I've got flux all through the joint. And then this particular one, I'm going to have to remove some of this flux paste with my finger just so I can see that joint line up. And I want to make sure that the joint is perfect before I solder it. So what I use, this is an old graphite mold from industrial CAD welding. These are designed to absorb heat, and I've found that to be one of the most important things when making a ring is your ability to absorb heat while you're soldering. So these have helped me out tremendously. I'm not even sure where you would pick one of these up. I'd probably start on eBay looking up graphite mold. But just like your charcoal block, right here, your charcoal block is designed to reflect heat and push heat back up into the setting as you're working on it. The graphite mold is designed to pull heat back out of your piece, and that's very important for what I'm about to show you. So since we're pulling the heat away from the piece as we heat it up with the torch, I'm going to use a lot more heat to solder this piece. And it's just one more level of control, heat control, when you're soldering. And it helps a lot with rings. So now I've got the torch on relatively high, and I'm going to heat this up. And it's going to solder relatively quick. Okay, just like that. So now I've got the soldered ring, and it's kind of in a funny shape at this point in time, and that's quite all right. Just going to drop it in my water, cool it off, and this is the point where I check my size and I see how I did on my good guess. So put the ring on the mandrel, and at this point it's like a football shape going on a round object, so you're going to have to kind of use your mallet and try to get that round shape back into it. And on this particular one, I made a pretty good guess. I'm over a 7. I'm at about a 7, and I could probably stretch it to 7 1/8. So I would say for shooting for a size 7, that was pretty good. All right. Now I've got my round ring. Okay. And I've also got my bezel. We need to put these two pieces together. So first of all, right now what I've got is I've got a round shape on top of this band, which is where this is where we soldered it. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a flat spot for that bezel to sit on. And we don't want to make a flat spot too far down that we go through the band back here on our flat lap. But we want to make a nice place for that bezel to sit on. So
Okay, that went relatively well. We're ready to solder this together. Just drying it off a minute. And this is where using the charcoal block versus the graphite block, or vice versa, can make a big difference. So here, what we're going to do is we're using the graphite block because we want to pull the heat away from the bezel, and I'll show you. So this is, just show you, this is my charcoal block, this is my graphite block. Okay, so the graphite block is designed to pull the heat down away and out of the piece. It takes a lot more heat to do what we're doing here. So you can kind of see where I'm going. So we've got the ring sitting on top of the bezel now. If I were to use the charcoal block, this block, it's very likely, and I've done it before, that I will end up melting the bezel before the ring gets hot enough to solder. So that's why this is so important. So I'm going to get some handy flux on here, and we're going to make this happen. So here, again, I've got that nice flat spot. Just going to apply the flux to that area, and a lot of times I like to kind of go down around this side, just over the shoulder of it, just a little bit. And that makes it so that I get a nice flow of solder around the bezel. And now is the time when you can decide your orientation for the stone. You can have it, you know, sideways or straight, or this is the direction I decided for this stone and this piece. I get feedback too from people that, you know, like the setting long ways, or like it, you know, north-south more. It just depends. There's just different strokes for different folks, I guess. To me, it has a lot more to do with the aesthetics of the piece and how the greenstone is presented. And this stone presents best this way, so that's why we're orientating it north-south. So here, I'm adjusting my heat, and I need a lot of heat, a lot more than I normally do. And the reason is because that block is absorbing the heat. And as you start to heat the ring up, I start at the ring on the top, and you'll see the solder start to bubble and boil. And what you want to do is just continue to let that boil until it stops dancing, because that dancing can literally, it can throw the ring right off of the bezel. So now that the flux has normalized, I can begin to heat the band up without it falling over. And what I want to do is just apply this solder to the back side of this joint. Oops, and it slid on me just a little bit. Well, this is interesting. Got it back. Now I'd like to just get maybe a little bit more solder on this, because I just didn't feel like it got enough. And that is that. Beautiful. This is our ring, nice and hot, completely soldered, and we didn't melt the bezel in the process. So there
there we go. A ring ready to put the greenstone in and polish up and make beautiful. Okay, just pulling this ring out of the pickle bath. I had it in, and it's turned out really good. Just kind of cleaning off the residue. Take a look, see what we got. Now at this point, you can kind of see all of the solder lines and stuff in the piece, and it really, really turned out pretty good. It's going to be a nice piece. Okay, ready to set the ring. Got the greenstone right here. So we're going to set that lovely greenstone in the ring. And I haven't checked it yet, but it should work pretty good. So again, on this particular, I'm going to put the small end in first. So just like this. It's going to be hard for me to show you and do it, but the small end in first. Just like that. And so now it's just setting in there. And we're going to start working the bezel and tightening that stone up. So here, I usually just put the ring on my forefinger, and I'll just start pressing the sides in, usually the long sides, and then I'll turn it to the other long side, and this just sort of snugs the stone in place in the center. Then I can kind of work the north and south edges, trying not to create any wrinkles in the bezel. This stone didn't have much of a shoulder. So it is a lower profile greenstone, but it's still going to set very nicely. And a lot of times in rings you want that lower profile, just so it doesn't get caught and snagged on things. That's the feedback I get anyway. Okay, now I've got the bezel worked pretty well around the edge of the greenstone. It's looking very nice. I think I'm ready to use the Dremel now on the edge of the bezel. And again, I'm going to pay attention not to touch the greenstone with the brush. I'm trying to only touch the metal or the silver. It's very important to know your abrasives when you're working with stones. This brush is capable of scratching the greenstone. And I just want to make sure I don't run up on the top of it. ring is just about done. That's a 400 grit polish on the metal. So now I'm going to take my wire brush and this is just a it's just a wire brush, and by putting just barely any pressure on the stone, moving this Dremel at a high speed, I can achieve a very nice polish on the metal. The key is light pressure. You want to put almost like it's not even touching it, and you'll be very happy with the polish that these metal brushes can do if you use them correctly. Okay, it's my greenstone ring. It's better than I expected today. It looks very, very nice. The metal is very, very polished. The bezel turned out perfect. It came right around the top side of that greenstone, and there's just enough greenstone coming out of the top, you know, so it stays nice and visible, and it'll really present well. It's a very nice greenstone ring. Okay, some of you were probably wondering if I was going to do this or not. I ended up bringing this over to the high-speed buffing wheel, and putting the buffing wheel on it actually brought the polish out even better than that wire brush. So here's the ring. It turned out outstanding. Probably wouldn't recommend skipping that high-speed buffing wheel step. It just makes that metal pop. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate you. Make sure you hit the like button at the bottom of your screen, and come back and see us. We'll have a lot more. Thank you.